Hi everybody, I'm Nyree. I run an adoption support channel. Today we're going to talk about how to build attachment, and I'm going to take you through what attachment really is in its simplest form and ways that you can build attachment if you're thinking of adopting or fostering, or actually for any situation if attachment's a subject that you're interested in. If you're thinking of adopting or fostering, you will notice that attachment is a big buzzword and it comes up everywhere, in everything you read, in your training. It's always mentioned, and sometimes I think people can lose the concept of what it really is. People just tend to talk about bonding and think it's the same thing as attachment, and it's not quite the same thing. So if you think of attachment in terms of an invisible piece of elastical string holding you to your child that you can't really see, well, that's why it's invisible, I guess, but it's more about the child feeling safe, feeling secure and familiar with a situation, than it is feeling loved. I would say bonding is more about love, and I say attachment's more about security and safety, and your child feeling secure and safe will obviously produce better results for them. The majority of children that we deal with are likely to have insecure attachment, which means that it's never a given that you're in a safe situation, and it's never a given that you're going to trust any of the adults around you. So no matter how good you are as a foster care and adopter, you have your work cut out to try and reinstall those foundations and those trusts. It's not going to happen just because you're a nice person. You're going to have to work for it, and that's why I'm here today, to tell you how to do that. The first way to build attachment is to give children familiar routines. Now, you'll see this in lots of the therapeutic parenting guidance as well. It seems like it's a really boring thing to do, but if you build a familiar routine with an adopted or foster child and they know exactly what's going to happen when, then that takes all the guessing work out and all the fear out of it. For children who are very insecure, not knowing what will happen next, even in the simplest of ways, will cause them problems and issues around attachment. And as soon as they begin to trust that you are going to give them meals at a certain time, that this is what's going to happen midday, this is what's going to happen later on in the evening, they're going to get the same bedtime routine, they're going to get the same mealtime routine, they are going to begin to relax a little bit more. That horrible anxiety that can bubble up inside of us when we're scared or fearful, that's going to be at a lower level because they know what's going to happen, and you're not going to suddenly spring anything on them. Again, if you've got a child or you're thinking of having children that may have suffered from neglect and abuse, they obviously don't know what's going to happen next. They don't know if they're going to get what they need if they're neglected, and they don't know if they're going to be hurt if they've been abused. So think in terms of how the child is thinking. So that's the first thing, familiar routines. So let me give you an example of our own children, because sometimes you want to hear from me that I know what I'm talking about, and most of the time I do, sometimes I don't, but I think I do on this. So for our boys then, one thing that they always want is repetition of what we can provide for them. Something very simple, like they enjoy porridge for breakfast, we get porridge in, the porridge goes. Instead of saying, can we have something different now? They'll probably say, can we have it again? We do something really nice on a Saturday morning, so we start to go up to the park regularly on a Saturday morning, then they will want to make that part of their routine. Not necessarily because it's the park, but because it's familiar. So when they wake up on a Saturday morning and they haven't got school, they know what's going to happen. They're going to go to the park. Another thing that is important to remember as well, sometimes children will read those non-verbal cues from you. So you think that you are keeping calm, or you think that you are portraying love toward them or giving them a safe environment, but a lot of your non-verbal cues aren't giving that to them. And children that have been in a difficult home life, a difficult home situation, are very good at reading non-verbal cues because they're getting ready for something bad to happen. So it's what we call hypervigilance. Again, I'll give you another example of when one of my sons was assessed for speech and language in school when he was much younger, and the first thing the lady said was he was really aware that I was there. He knew that I was in the class watching him. Now, children in general, and I can speak from in general because I've got biological children as well, and I've worked as an early years specialist, don't do that. They're not always looking around to check the windows and the doors and what stranger is in the room. So hypervigilance can mean that children are very aware of non-verbal cues, even if they're reading them incorrectly. So you've got to be really careful that you don't give off the wrong vibe or send them the wrong message unwittingly. And when I'm talking about non-verbal cues, it's really important that your child gets to see you regularly make eye contact with them in a kind and caring way. They get the odd little sort of tap or touch on the shoulder or on the hand, then do it as often as they like you to do it. That touch is really, really good as a non-verbal cue for building attachment. Also, voice is really important. I can say the same thing to you twice in a monotone, uninteresting voice, or in a really loving and kind voice, and in some case a really squeaky voice, but children don't mind that. If I say to my boys, "Sweetheart, did you have a good day at school?" That's pretty flat, and they might ignore me. But if I look at them and go, "Sweetheart, did you have a good day at school?" and engage them, a very, very simple way of building attachment is using voice and eye contact. So all those non-verbal cues, think about how you use them. You know, we all get tired, we all get down, we all have days when we can't therapeutically parent and we're just rubbish at building attachment, and that's just life. But try to think as much as possible, and I'm talking to myself here, about how you use voice to engage your child and build attachment. So that's another way. As adults, we deal with life differently than children, and maybe it's something that you might not have thought about before, maybe it's something you do. As adults, we have lots of history behind us, and if you're as old as me, you have a lot of history behind you that you can draw on. So you know the things that are going to be troublesome to you, and you know the things that you're going to enjoy. You know the things, if you've been through a lot in your life, that might bring triggers, and you know the things that you can cope with, kind of thing. Children don't have history to call on in the same way. Their histories are much shorter, and for some of them their histories may not be positive, so they've got nothing to call on to help them to understand what attachment is in their own childlike way. Children very much live for the here and now, and that's the simplest way to deal with it. So it doesn't really work so much if you say to them, "Do you remember what we did 3 weeks ago and it worked really well, and so we're going to do that again today, and you know, we're going to do it slightly differently," but it's too much for them. You really have to keep it into the very immediate present, and just, you can skip around with a couple of days, but I wouldn't try to call on too much of your previous parenting to help them to understand what you're trying to do, or in their case, go back too far into their history to help to kind of build what you're doing now. It's more important that you put memories from now in that you're creating as a family. So what I mean by that is the happy times that you have, things like, you know, the celebrations that you have, the mini holidays and trips that you have. Those are going to start building from now, and that will be easier for your child to call on than previous histories and memories. So we've talked about keeping things familiar. So what I want to say here, I want to build on that now, and lots of children with trauma kind of mirror children with autism, and it's quite difficult to separate, and social workers have an issue when you come forward and say, "I think this child has autism," because more often than not they'll say, "No, it's trauma, it's the patterns of trauma, that they don't like change and they want familiarity." So we're going to take that familiarity thing a little bit further. If you want to build attachment, then you're going to have to think very carefully about not suddenly introducing things that they're not ready for. And so this is more than just keeping a familiar routine. This is being careful about not suddenly deciding that you want to go to somebody's house that they are unfamiliar with, that might cause them anxiety, that you want to just quickly off the hoof go and take a trip which is further away and they're not used to being in the car, that you do not suddenly want to take them away on holiday further away before they're ready for it. So things like holidays can cause huge anxiety to children that have got insecure attachment, and you need to prepare really well for it. So when it comes to building attachment, you're building the memories and you're building in their capacity and resilience to be able to deal with change as well. So whilst I'm saying to you, have familiar routines all of the time, and I do mean that, I'm also saying to you, Don't just stick with the same routines all the time. Every now and again, introduce something different and allow them to adapt to it. So it's important that you do introduce change every now and again, but you do it in a planned way. If you're going to help their attachment, you have to do it in a planned way. So you can't just suddenly introduce things that are going to make them anxious and scared. And when it comes to holiday preparation, if you're going to go a long way away, or you're going to take a train journey or plane journey for the first time, you've got to build up to that considerably. I mean, some people don't need to, like their children are very settled, but I would say if you want to keep the attachment good and that you want the child to feel safe, this is what you're trying to do, then you build them up to these things, and they'll start asking you as well to do more things when their attachment is more secure, and then you'll be able to try out stuff with them, take them further away, take them to people's houses they've never been to before, do trips that are unusual, try out outrageous foods, all those things you'll be able to do in time, but you have to build all of that in a slow and steady way. Now, some children are like little shadows and they follow you around from the minute you have them and forevermore. And this is because children haven't got the same concepts as us when they're younger, for sure. So a very young child, when you're out of the room, you've disappeared. They don't have the concept that you're out in the kitchen doing something when they're very, very young. So we're talking sort of toddler, sort of sometimes preschool age. You're not there, you're somewhere else. Where are you? You've disappeared. For a child with poor attachment, you disappearing anywhere, into another room, into the garden, nipping up to the neighbour, even if there's other people in the house, but you're the attachment figure that they keep trying to attach to. So you're imagining this invisible kind of elastic stretching out, and you're trying to get them to allow you to stretch it out a little bit further, a little bit further, a little bit further. Children who are insecure are frightened to lose you, because they've lost people in the past and you are becoming somebody that they're desperately trying to attach to. So if you suddenly disappear into other rooms, they panic that they're going to lose you. And I know that sounds ludicrous, but that's how it is. So for some children, it's going to be important that you remain in the same room as much as possible. As annoying as that might feel, that's a good way of building attachment. So if they're playing happily, they can play happily along in the same room as you. That's brilliant, even if they're occupied. For some children, it's important that you just keep them close as you possibly can, especially in the early days. Being in the same room and talking to them intermittently reminds them that you know that they are there, that they are important to you, and it also makes them see you physically. They know you're there, they know that they're not going to lose you. Taking this a little bit further, I've just mentioned to you that children lose their attachment figures. So birth family or attachment figures, no matter what that history is, an attachment is still probably there, even with a known abuser, but most likely somewhere in the family there would have been a real attachment figure, their primary caregiver, and they've lost that person. And then, of course, they're going to lose their foster carer, and hopefully there would have been some sort of attachment with the foster carer. Some better than others, yes, but there should be some. Another thing that's really important to do to help attachment for a child who's able to verbalise this is to talk about those people. Now, if the birth family have been very scary and abusive, then that's going to be difficult until they're ready for it. But what you don't want them to do is suddenly think that all the people they ever were attached to just disappeared off the face of the earth and now they're with you. So what message does that give them? The message that gives them is you're going to disappear because these people have disappeared. It's not a case of you're going to think that you're the best thing that ever happened to them, and you might well be, but they're just going to think they're going to lose you because they lost the others, so why won't they lose you? So if you can keep in touch with a foster carer in any way you can, or talk about them, then do. If you're able to talk about birth family without causing anxiety to the child, then do, because it sets things in a timeline for them and helps them to realise that you're part of a timeline, and the people are still there as part of their history. Even if it wasn't good, they're still there, and you're part of that timeline. So it's okay to tell them that not to worry, you're here. So if you go out into the kitchen, say, don't worry, I'm here, I'm in the kitchen. Some of them will just follow you out. They just want to know where you are, and it's really sweet, but it shows how insecure that attachment is. And for so many foster carers and adopters, and I can talk about my own history looking back over placements that we've had where we've felt that they've settled within 6 weeks. No, that never happens. Honestly, it never happens. Okay, you could argue with me if you like. They might look like they've settled, but no child can just walk into a stranger's house, however good you are, however loving you are, and just settle after 6 weeks. Might look like they are, but trust me, they'll have deep-seated anxieties. Some children more than others, I get that, but you need to work on attachment for years, a lifetime, but for most children at least a year to 2 years before things really are more concretely settled. So this is a video that should help you really for years to come, I would say. When you first get involved with adoption or fostering, it's very tiring, it's very exhausting, and you do need help and support. I've put videos on there about how friends and family can support you. You do need to have your support network in place so you can call on them quickly, and you do need help around the house, just doing general chores and things. So you do need people involved, so your child will get to know other people, and that's fine, absolutely fine. But I would be really, really careful about leaving your child for play dates with fairly unfamiliar adults, situations where they're in another house without you. So of course, if they're getting really close to Nana, Grandma, whatever, they can spend some time with her or Granddad, with them, you know, grandparents. And of course, in time, they'll be able to host sleepovers with them. I'm not saying don't introduce sleepovers. I'm not saying don't do it, but I'm saying be really careful, because in their minds, where are you going? So these people might be lovely, and they might be starting to attach to them, but they're not their main attachment. And so until you feel they're quite beginning to become quite secure with you, you just need to be really careful. Even play dates. One of our boys went for a play date. It wasn't that long ago. It was a few years ago. So he was 9. And he came back so agitated, and I said, what is wrong? Have you not had a good time? He said, yeah. And he said, and we had this for tea and we had that for tea. And are you all right? Are you all right? And he just said to me, I didn't really like it there. And I said, did you not like it there for anything specific reason? He went, no. And I said, was it because you were away from us? And he said, yes, right away. And he always tells the truth. He just didn't like it, that he was in someone else's house, with somebody else's routine, with somebody else's mum, and away from us. And he's 9, and we've had him, this particular child, since he was 2. I mean, our boys have got a high level of need. You can check out my other videos. They have, but still, be really, really careful that you don't try and kind of push things on too quickly, because the thing about attachment is once they have a good attachment with you, they can branch out and they can begin to make fantastic attachments with everybody else. But until they've done that, they can't. And so you've got to really basically work on that piece of elastic really, really hard. I hope that helps you guys. I know it's a longer video, but I wanted to cover it quite broadly for you. And check out my channel. If you're not an adopter or foster carer, you could still subscribe, because there's parenting advice on there, but largely this is for adopters, but a lot of the subjects are suitable for foster carers as well. So thank you for watching.